welcome everybody. We're broadcasting here from, as Beth said, Portland, Maine, and the Designtex Surface Imaging Studio factory. So she gave a good introduction there, so I don't need to go into the background fully, but I just want to mention that I did come to this from a photography background, and digital printing was something I started doing out of college and came to this facility before Designtex purchased Portland Color, which was what we were called before. So I've been doing this for a long time, and it was really great when Designtex came along and we got to kind of reinvent ourselves from doing fine art and digital signage to doing commercial interiors printing. So I'll kick it over to Scott next, and then Matt, and then we'll start our presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Scott Peterman. I've been working at Designtex for about 12 years, and as well as Mark, I'm a trained photographer and artist, and I worked for about 15 years as an artist and a freelance photographer, and was familiar with Portland Color, which was what Designtex was before we were Designtex at Surface Imaging. And I started working here because I became really interested in digital printing and the capabilities and what we can do here. At Designtex, I'm in the department manager for pre-press, mostly working on files. And Matt?
Thanks, Scott. My name is Matt Notterman, and I've been at Designtex / Portland Color for 15 years now, and started in the finishing department. Now I oversee all finishing, as well as facilities and shipping. I am a painter by trade, so I graduated from Maine College of Art with a painting degree. But I also am a craftsman, and so I really like, just working with my hands, which is what kind of got me started with Portland Color in the first place, working in the finishing department. And now I just oversee, all the quality control that happens throughout all the products and getting it out to the clients. So, yeah.
Okay. So first we're going to show a couple slides and talk about kind of a broad overview of what we do, and then we're going to go into a short video that we produced to give you guys a behind the scenes look at the factory. So I'm going to go ahead and advance. Oops, did it just go out of full screen? So Designtex, if you're coming to this without much background knowledge about what we do, we're a surface materials company. So we create materials for the built environment, and broadly that means wall coverings, textiles, which could be upholsteries or draperies, as well as adhesive films. Oops, I'm trying to advance this and it's not going, so maybe Alyssa can. So Designtex core line, like I said, supplies the architecture and design community with lots and lots of great materials that are produced all over the world. But this slide is showing where we are here in Portland, Maine, which is kind of a small subset of Designtex, but it's where we produce any of the digitally printed products in our line. So here you can see a pulled back shot of part of our 20,000 square foot production facility in Portland. And this is where we run several machines that digitally print and cut materials that fit within that broader scope of the Designtex product line. So we have a couple different categories in surface imaging, and one of them is called by the yard, which kind of fits in more tightly with the Coraline products that ship out of New Jersey and are made all over the world. But in Portland, we print onto a number of different substrates, and those substrates can, are usually, vinyls or vinyl alternatives, which is, and textiles and the by the yard line. This is showing one of our latest launches, which is a collection which we licensed artwork from Bauhaus. And that can be produced in rolls, which we sometimes print, or most of the time print on demand, but we also stock and fulfill smaller orders out of our distribution area here. So this is just showing kind of a larger shot of a couple of our printers. And then these materials go out into the world and become decorations for some really great spaces. This is a wall covering at Microsoft in San Francisco. This background, I believe, is what we've done, but the way that what we do here in Portland fits into Designtex as a whole and our parent company Steelcase is that we get to a lot of opportunities to kind of mix all the materials that Designtex and the products that Steelcase sells to create total solutions for spaces. And what I forgot to mention too is we have the By the Yard program, which fits in with our Coraline product that we print rolls of, but then we have our bespoke offering, which is a completely customized experience for the customer. So we can work through creating materials that are tailored just to specific sites and artwork directions. And that's part of what Scott does is as prepping files and working with designers to help them realize a vision for a space that is completely customized. Again, this is another bespoke wall covering, and in this case we used a silver substrate that has a sheen to it, and when you put ink on it you can control the amount of sheen and where that metallic area shows through. In this case, we did a ceiling as well as the wall to create almost like a cave type experience for this break room. And not only do we produce a lot of materials here, but we also act as sort of a hub for producing materials that actually get made in other facilities. So this is ceramic steel, which we partner with Polyvision, who's in Genk, Belgium, and makes these premium whiteboards as well as architectural panels out of ceramic coated steel that we can also print onto. This is an example of dye sublimation printing onto textile. And with that process, we can do a number of different things where the fabric gets fabricated into either drapery or acoustic panels or upholstery for furniture. And this is an example of a drapery application with a sheer fabric. Another wall covering, and we are able to, make these products work in a number of different spaces that have different performance needs, including healthcare and corporate and schools and, any type of space. Another example of our ceramic steel in a healthcare space. And wall covering in a healthcare space. Wall covering, and in this case, I don't know if you can see it, but we can also create a wrapping effect with some of the wall coverings and films that we have, so that you can have the wall and the elevator doors be a seamless image. And this is something I haven't mentioned yet, but window films is a very great category for us, where we're able to print onto optically clear films that then get applied to glass to create privacy or even wayfinding. Here's a hospitality. And restaurant. So you can see that we can create materials for any number of spaces and applications, and we do that all out of here in Portland, Maine, or in some cases outsourced to other facilities with specialty capabilities that we may not have. This is the last slide before we go into our video. So I just want to mention too that, so the video is going to give you guys a more of a behind the scenes look at the production process.
So the bespoke development approval process is a multi-stage process that usually begins with us sending out memo samples of all the substrates. And this is when a client doesn't know exactly what substrate they're using for a given solution. So we have, like for the wall coverings, we have vinyls or vinyl alternatives. The vinyls come in many different textures, and the similar products are printed the same image on each one, so you can see the difference in how images behave on different materials. Same for the textiles. There's several different drapery products, as well as the upholstery products. Wall coverings come in white, as well as different metallic options that we have. And then of course the window and wall films, which come in a bunch of different versions, both vinyl and vinyl alternatives. And once those are decided upon, we generally start doing samples using the client's art. And in that case, they'll be exploring color and scale and resolution. And in that step, we often do lots of color tests where we're doing color grids, because we have issues with both menomerism and different lighting situations will cause colors to shift. So we can match a color perfectly here under our lighting conditions, and then when it goes into an on-site situation, the colors can change. So we'll typically send color grids with variations on a color to show, so that they can have it in their space and see exactly what kind of colors. This is especially true with the window films, where opacity is an issue because lighting situations on the other side of the glass can change it pretty dramatically, both in color and density. So we'll send not only color grids, but density grids to choose opacity. And once all of this is figured out, we move on to the layout process, where we will build mechanical layouts that show exactly how the stuff will be paneled or laid out depending on the situation. With wall coverings, those can be really complex, like with stairwells, or super simple with just a rectangular wall. And that will show both the panel sizes and how they align, including bleed, whether there's doors, windows, fixtures, whatever, and how window film will coincide with wall coverings so that those things can match. And that process can be super straightforward and simple, where we get a response and an approval right away, or that can be, you know, many versions until we get to what the client is looking for. Once those are approved, we move on to the strike-off process, where we send a production strike-off, where it's showing the artwork exactly how it will be produced. And it's a two-part thing. It's got a header with all the information about materials and whatnot, and then it has a section where it shows the whole wall at a reduced size, and then a section where it shows the resolution. That way you can see color-wise how the whole thing is laid out, and then what it will look like at scale, at least in a smaller section. Now with vector art like this one, it's not such a big deal. They're really only looking at color because everything is vector and perfect. But with more photographic materials, and also with metallic materials and window film, you're going to want to see how it looks on a very particular substrate. Like in this case, it looks very different from the layout than it does on the silver substrate, as well as the resolution of this is a photographic image, and the resolution will reveal that stuff. There's a bunch of different examples here of what these look like. Some of them, like these are all vector, so they're pretty straightforward. This one is photographic, so the resolution is a real concern here. And this gives them a good sense of exactly what this is going to look like. Now this goes, one copy we retain here and one copy goes to the client, so that if they approve a particular strike off with a given number on it, they can say this one's approved, and then we have one here that we use to check the color when it's going on press, because that can sometimes be weeks or even months after this is approved, and we need to be able to follow up on that. And that's generally it. That's when we move into production and the product is produced.
So you just heard from Scott about the pre-press department and their process for setting up files and working with clients with artwork and working through the digital approval process. And now we're back here in the print room where we start to actually take that artwork and put it onto materials. So back here we use a couple different types of technology. Everything is digital inkjet, which allows us to do very short runs of custom artwork as well as longer runs of standard artwork for more or less the same cost. But we run two different types of machinery, which is dye sublimation over there, which we'll talk about in a minute, and UV printing. Dye sublimation is for textiles, and UV is for wall coverings and adhesive films for windows and panels and metal surfaces. So we have, in this area, we have the ViewTech printer, which is our workhorse for wall covering. And then we also have a smaller Mamaki printer that is, has a finer dot quality for running things like gradients and and more fine detail on window films and other adhesive films. They both utilize LED technology, which is a colder cure. So with UV, we either have arc-type lamps or LED lamps. They both cure the ink in the same way, which means they put down ink wet and then dry it instantly. And that means that makes a nice hard surface that is durable enough to take a wet install or enough burnishing to really get a good smooth installation. But the LED is a cooler cure, so that helps us run on different materials that would otherwise get warped or stretched with the hotter, more traditional arc-type lamps. So then over here we have our Workhorse wall covering printer. Kind of the opposite of what I said about this one over here, that is more of our specialty window film printer. It's a little bit more of a larger dot, and that allows us to print heavier, more opaque colors faster. So on this one, you can see we're printing one of our by-the-yard patterns. We typically run like a full roll start to finish, which is around 30 yards. And then take it over to the trimmer, and then it's ready to be sent off to the installation site. Capacity-wise, we typically run 2 shifts, and with that production time, we can run about 400 yards in a day. Again, this is an LED printer, and you can see, just like your desktop printer, it's going to go back and forth, putting down ink on every pass and curing it instantly with that UV wavelength lamp. So here we're printing some of our clear window film. It's a PET material, and it's optically clear, and then we typically print whiting on it and sometimes CMYK, but you can see that this machine, it's basically like your average desktop printer, just an enlarged version of it, and with those blue lights that you can see are the LED UV that are hitting the ink and curing it instantly. So you can see that this coming off the printer, basically ready to install after some trimming and packing, which you'll see later. But thing to point out here is that we do use 2 different kind of types of machines that use different size, or have the capability of producing different size dots. And this one is capable of producing a much smaller dot. And the trade-off to that is that it prints a lot slower than our wall covering printer, but it's able to produce much finer detail. So now we're looking at our textile printing process. So I mentioned earlier that we have 2 processes going on in here: the UV, which we talked about, and then our textile printing. So for fabric, we use a dye sublimation process, and it's actually a two-part process. We have to print on the paper first, and we do that in reverse. And then the paper comes off of the printer, and it goes on to the heat press, which actually transfers the image directly into the fabric. And the ink is a special type of sublimation ink that uses dyes that are able to be activated at temperature, which is 400 degrees Fahrenheit or thereabout, and those actually turn into a gas at that temperature and fuse with the polyester fibers in the fabric. So now we'll check out how that process works. So what you're seeing now is where the fabric or the print gets transferred from the paper to the fabric. So what we do is we basically sandwich the two together. You've got the printed paper here, which just came off of the machine you saw earlier, and the blank fabric down here. They come together and they run through this machine that has a heated cylinder in the center that drives the whole thing. And like I said, that cylinder is heated to 400 degrees, and the speed of the machine is set to make a dwell time for the paper and the fabric to be together in there, which is optimized to really get the ink to sublimate deeply into that fabric. And the fabric we're running right now is our rocket material. But this process can be used for pretty much any of our materials. One important caveat is that it has to be a polyester, so or at least a high blend of polyester. So most of the fabrics that we run are 100% polyester. This is rocket. It's mostly used for upholstery, so you can print anything you want, turn it into a chair or couch, but it can also be used for panels. Then we have drapery fabrics and Krypton materials that we partner with Krypton to be able to print onto their materials that have the high performance moisture barrier backing and stain repellent. And our collection, the C5x5, is all on those performance materials. So that's about it for dye sublimation and for the printing department. Next you're going to see finishing and quality control and shipping, how we wrap everything up and get it out the door.
The finishing department takes care of all post-print production. Post-print production consists of cutting, lamination, inspection, and packaging. All digitally printed wall covering and window film is trimmed to size before shipping out to clients. Whether the job is by the yard or bespoke, all wall covering material is trimmed on our Photoba digital trimmer. The Photoba uses lasers to read registration lines printed alongside the image to know where to cut. By the yard or yardage rolls of material, both window film and wall covering, travel through a set of slicers, removing the selvage and leaving only the printed image along the edge of the material. This makes for easier installation in the field. As the selvage is being trimmed off, the material is then rolled back up on a 3-inch core. Bespoke printed wall covering is trimmed to the sizes called out on the approved layout. Registration lines are printed along all 4 sides of each panel. The lasers read the lines and accurately cut the panels to size. All panels are printed with small text below the image calling out what it is. This gets left in place to assist the end user during installation. During the trimming process, as each panel is being cut, the operator is visually inspecting the panel for any flaws such as ink weeping, UV banding, and discoloration. The operator also checks which panels have been trimmed and QC'd on a copy of the layout. This acts as a second point for accuracy in what has been produced per each job. After all panels have been trimmed and accounted for, the wall covering moves into a final inspection process. During the final inspection process, all panels are laid out on a large 10 by 24 foot table. Alignment and color consistency are verified between panels, as well as confirming the measurements of panel sizes to the approved layout. While panels are laid out on the table, The aligned image is then photographed from a bird's eye view camera. Photographing from above and viewing on a computer screen allows the operator to double check the alignment and color consistency. Once the job is confirmed as complete and accurate, all panels are rolled together in craft paper. Each roll is packed with the appropriate layout, tubed, and boxed for shipment. All shipments are also supplied with the appropriate installation instructions per material. If a job requires lamination, that takes place before trim. Printed rolls are sent through the Drytac UV coater to apply a clear liquid top coat over the image. The liquid laminate is applied to add a durable, highly cleanable surface that protects the digitally printed material from scuffs and abrasion, as well as adds longevity to the colors of the UV ink. Material is instantly cured while traveling under UV light and then gets rolled back up onto a core. After laminating, rolls are sent to the toba to be trimmed. Paneled window film, along with all samples and strike-offs, are trimmed on our Kongsberg iCut. The iCut, along with our newer Zund, are both highly precise CNC cutting platforms. Both machines are similar in that they use digital cut files to read information, can accurately cut a wide variety of materials to within a 64th of an inch, have router capabilities for cutting materials up to 2 inches thick, and are extremely efficient with production output. The only difference between the two platforms is that the Zund is equipped with a laser module for cutting polyester material. The laser module not only cuts through polyester material, but also sears the thread edge in the process, which keeps the fabric from fraying. Our enhanced wannabe product, both the PSA and the hanging panels, are cut using the laser module. Enhanced wannabe hanging panels are also sewn in-house by one of our many skilled technicians. All surface imaging products are quality control inspected at every step of production. From file setup to printing, then cutting, aligning, and pack out, we all strive to make sure a perfect product is produced and sent to our clientele.
Thank you so much for that fascinating look into the factory. That was truly a special treat to get to see the entire process. I'd love to start us off with hearing a little bit more about each of your career paths and how you've ended up at Designtex Surface Imaging. Mark, maybe you could start that off for us.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I came from a place of studying photography, but then got out of school, and I actually went into doing manual labor for a while. You know, getting out of art school, I was really tired of critiques and the intellectual world. So I went into doing something completely outside of the realm of making things for a long time. Not a long time, but eventually came back to it by way printing, and because it was always a passion of mine during college. Also, was making prints. So actually, making something was great to get back into doing, and then it sort of just progressed from there. I mean, digital took over traditional printing, and we, working at different labs. Actually, I worked at a few different places in different parts of the country, but doing the same types of work. And then when I got back here to Portland Color, we, like I said before, we reinvented ourselves a couple times, from doing fine art printing all the way through to events, and when talking about dye sublimation printing, now we are doing a lot of all architectural applications. But for a long time, when we first started doing dye sub, it was for trade show graphics and window banners for retail spaces. So I just kind of got into printing, and then it progressed from there into the different ways that you can use digital print to decorate surfaces.
That's great. Scott, could you fill us in on how you've ended up at Designtex Surface Imaging? Excuse me.
Sure. My story is not unlike Mark's. I come from a fine art background. I have a master's degree in fine art, in photography, and I worked mainly as an artist for 15 years, where that was really the only thing I was doing, doing some commercial and editorial work. And at that time, I was shooting film, and I still am now, but I was shooting film and getting it processed at Portland Color, because Portland Color back then was a lab that did a lot of, they processed film and did printing for fine artists like Mark.
I used to process Scott's film, so.
Yeah, exactly. And I got to know Portland Color that way. And in 2007, 2008, I sort of switched over to digital printing from the color darkroom to printing using inkjet printers. And that's when I became interested in what Portland Color was doing, and came to work here, mostly because I was really interested in, cutting edge digital technology that Portland Color had access to. And at that time, we were printing a lot using a light jet printer, which is a sort of a digital enlarger. Essentially, it's an RGB laser that projects onto traditional photographic paper, and then it goes through a roller transport wet chemical process, much like a traditional old school photograph. And that, for me, having access to that device at Portland Color, working here, was it was huge for me as an artist, being able to make large scale digital prints, and then I'm now working here full time for 12 years. So
that's great. I apologize if I missed it, but would you mind just explaining for us what Portland Color is?
Portland Color started out many years ago. They did art reproduction, started out, it was called SlideWorks, right, Mark? Originally, yeah. And they basically made slides, like old school chrome slides for artists. And then it became a photographic lab that processed film, and then it was a dark room, and then they started doing printing in the dark room in color and black and white for artists. And then they expanded when we moved into the facility we're in now. We started doing mostly trade show graphics and POP signage stuff for like L.L. Bean, like all the photographic signage, that's in the stores and whatnot. And then started expanding into commercial printing, doing a lot of the stuff we're here now. And at that time, Designtex used us, Portland Color, as an outsourced vendor. Basically, we did all of the wall coverings for Designtex. We printed as Portland Color. In fact, Designtex was one of our biggest clients at that time, and they just ended up purchasing us when the owner of Portland Color wanted to get out of the business. and Designtex bought us, and so now we do basically what we did for them before, except we're owned by Designtex.
Yeah, so I would just add so Portland Color existed for a while, and Designtex was a large client of Portland Color, and then Designtex decided that it would be, a good move to be able to control the printing and the whole process more and expand as a way to expand that part of the product line, purchased Portland Color. So we actually still use the name internally Portland Color a lot, just as, referring back to the old days, but it was kind of a cool transition to be part of.
That's great. Thank you for elaborating further. Matt, how about you? How have you ended up at Designtex?
Yeah, so I actually ended up here on accident, and right outside of, I graduated from Maine College of Art with painting in 2000, and right outside of college, I started a mural business as a self-employed artist. And I traveled a lot down to Boston from Portland, and I was gone. This went on for maybe 3 years, but I was gone for 2 weeks at a time regularly, and I was kind of getting burnt out. I was newly married and just wasn't happy doing it anymore. A lot of the clientele that were interested in having, murals in their homes were, down in the Boston area. So I ended up taking a break from that, and just financially I needed to get some work. So a friend of Mark's, and I also knew Mark, told me that there was a part-time opening at Portland Color. So I came on board, and it was when Portland Color had just moved into the facility that we're in now, so 14 Industrial Way, where Surface Imaging resides. And I really liked the vibe. I liked the people that I was working with. And like I said, we just moved in, so nothing was in place. There was, everything was, disorganized. I really enjoy organizing and setting things in place. So I worked with the production manager at the time to sort of lay out the whole facility. And I have a skilled background in carpentry and different trades here and there. So just took it as an advantage to, start something new. And from part-time went to full-time pretty quickly, and then took over managing the finishing department, which then I've been doing now for like 13 years. But also now oversee all of the facilities for the space, building, different furniture, or, working with contractors, this and that. And then also run the shipping department, making sure the quality control, the last step before it gets to clients or installers, is all buttoned up. So yeah, but 15 years goes by pretty quick.
Time flies and you're having fun, right?
Can I just add something here that, because Matt and Scott both touched on something that speaks to the culture here in surface imaging, is that we do, like Matt mentioned, the vibe, and Scott mentioned access to material. So we tend to attract people with backgrounds in arts, not only attract, but seek people out, so that we keep that culture of creativity and ingenuity and inquisitiveness going in the whole organization.
That's great. How do you decide what materials to use?
Scott.
Well, that's kind of, like I said in the video, that's a big part of the beginning of the process. It's usually a development, depending on the solution that they're looking for. When it comes to like a wall covering, we may send samples on 5 or 6 different materials so they can see what different things look like. And there are performance issues that need to be addressed. Like, in a healthcare environment, things need to be able to be cleaned in a different way than, say, an office building, and that will drive what material solution we'll recommend. And that can also, it may sometimes be driven by the artwork. Some materials print cleaner than others. Some materials will hide defects better than others. And that's often a big part of the artwork development process in general, is finding, the right substrate solution for the art solution versus the installation solution.
Building requirements can enter into it too. Sometimes people come to us with a need for a certain construction or content of the material based on their wanting to have lead credits or any number of different types of standards they're trying to meet.
Absolutely. Do you ever have to adjust colors of the design based on the substrate?
Yeah, definitely. Window film is sort of a nightmare in that situation because we never know exactly what the application is going to be. And whenever there's light shining through the material, it changes the color, both the hue and the density of the color pretty dramatically. So, we have a pretty tight situation here that we, view color correction in, and we can match Pantone and paint colors pretty accurately, but then, it goes to a very dark office or a very bright office, or, something where direct light is shining through it, or where there's no light shining through it, and it becomes a completely different color. So like I said before, we often send grids of colors where we might give, 10, 20, 30 different versions of something that's pretty close to the color we're trying to match, and then the client can, install it or just view it in the given location, and then pick from that exactly the one that they'll use that we can then insert into the art. And that becomes obviously a little bit more complicated when it's a photographic thing because, vector is very easy to plug in numbers and make colors exact, but photographically, you gotta kind of wing it, because it's a continuous tone image.
Yeah, I think that might lead us into our next question of, do you ever run into problems matching colors since pigments and paints behave so differently from dyes and inks, and I'm sure the various substrates?
Yeah, and some substrates handle things differently than others. One of the other issues we have is with very, very light colors, especially like off-whites. Like oftentimes we're asked to match paint colors that are, simply an off-white. And when we have one of the main wall covering materials we use is a vinyl alternative we call DNA, and it's a partially recycled product, and it's not vinyl, and so it's not a very bright white substrate. It's actually sort of already a kind of creamy color, and so it's very hard to hit particular whites, in which case, if we use a vinyl where it's a very, very bright white, we can hit almost any color. And so certain substrates give limitations. We have white ink that we can use on at least the UV printers, which help with that, because you can mix white ink with colors to create things that are a little bit more accurate. I mean, it's a large part of what we do in pre-presses, just spending day after day after day matching colors. Pantone or Benmore or Sherwin-Williams or whatever.
Right. Does Designtex ever print on metals such as copper or brass?
No, we kind of phased out printing onto, well, yes and no. We kind of phased out printing onto rigid goods in-house. So in the building, we have focused on a roll-to-roll process. And we do have metallic wall coverings that can create the effect of different metal sheens. But in terms of actual rigid materials, we have the ceramic coated steel, which we partner with Polyvision, and they produce that in Belgium. And then we have a couple of other vendors that we can go to for printing onto mainly aluminum not so much copper. But you know, there's possibilities that are out there. We have to be careful that any material, any product that we offer meets our standards. And a lot of times we find that the printing process isn't always compatible with certain rigid materials at the standard that we need it to be.
Yeah, theoretically, we can print on just about anything with UV. That's the whole point of using the UV technology, because it's curing the ink directly onto the surface. It doesn't, like with a regular inkjet printer, you have to have a coated surface for the ink to adhere and to dry properly. With the UV, it's drying instantly, so you can print on almost anything. You can print on plywood, you can print on metals, you can print on just about anything. But like Mark said, you know, if we're warrantying something for 10 years, it can't be scraped off. And a lot of metallic materials like you know, copper or something, it just will not adhere properly. It'll be a solid ink and you could rub it. It would be pretty great, but it's not going to withstand, you know, exterior durability for 10 years. Which is why we use the ceramic coated steel, which is virtually indestructible. That, you know, often gets used in like subway tunnels and whatnot.
I think that leads us into the next one. Can you speak a little bit about the durability? We have a question on how often businesses come back to replace the products.
I think for surface imaging, most products are 5-year warranty actually. And usually the printing, and I think typically for an interior space, they're not really changing things out any more often than 5 to 7 years. So we would see people, and I believe we've seen turnover with some of the hospitality clients that we have, where we might be doing a space and then we'll do that same space again. Like I would say, I don't know, Scott might know this with our Marriott standards program, like again, 5 to 7 years or so would be probably the shortest amount of time we would see somebody redo a wall covering that we had done.
Thank you. Matt, I think I'm going to direct this one to you. What is the typical scale of the majority of work that you're working on, or the range of scale that you're working on?
Do you mean like the order size?
Yes.
I mean, they're all dependent, really. It depends on, you know, if somebody's only doing one wall, or if we're doing a hospitality rollout for a hotel and maybe we're doing, you know, 300 plus rooms. So, you know, the scale of work is, you know, very different. But the workflow kind of evens it all out, if you will. All bespoke, it's all, you know, printed and trimmed the same way and inspected and packed out the same way. So it kind of feels like, you know, all jobs are created equal almost. And then yardage, it's just produced on a roll and sent out. So sometimes we'll get an order for 400 yards of, you know, one pattern, or we'll get an order for 30 rolls of a pattern, but it's kind of the same product and process, so it doesn't really feel much different. I don't know if that really answers the question, but as far as it's a wide range. So sometimes we get small orders, and sometimes we get really large orders. We kind of hope for bigger orders than smaller ones, but you know, we take what we can get.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think we're just out of time for today, but I do have one final question, and I'd love to hear from all of you. Matt, I think we could start with you. Any last words of wisdom or advice for the students tuning in today?
I mean, I guess thinking back to when I was a student, if I could see in the future and then give myself some advice, it would don't be afraid to, go down any channels of, that might open up, or, getting out of your comfort zone to try something new. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I'll go next. I think I just piggyback on Matt's answers that don't pigeonhole yourself. And, you know, we've all actually studied different things than what we're doing somewhat. I mean, not completely different, but it is, I think, important to be open-minded and take opportunities that come your way that may not fit with exactly what you'd be doing. But, you know, that's it, I think.
Yeah, and I just have one more thing. So it's kind of interesting how, you know, like I said, I was a self-employed muralist and then decided to give up on that. And then now we're almost doing kind of the same thing that I left, but completely different. So I really still enjoy seeing, you know, how we can impact an environment, and that part's really interesting for this type of job, seeing all the different installations and environments that we end up creating through our process here.
Definitely. And Scott, any last words from you?
I would say be original. You know, one of the things working in a facility like this is we can sometimes get bogged down in doing repetitive stuff, you know, where we have to print 5,000 yards of the same really sort of dull artwork, and it becomes a little bit monotonous. But, you know, there are days when we do really interesting artwork, you know, and installations that are super creative or big, you know, on a huge scale. And something really dramatic, and it's really great to be involved in that when you see something come to fruition. You know, when it's a large scale project with really interesting art that gets to, you know, go in a great location where people can see it. It's pretty fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, all wonderful advice. I want to say a huge thank you for coming on today and taking the time to share with the students and give us such a behind the scenes look at Designtex. We really appreciate it. Students, thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about Designtex, you can visit their website, designtex.com, or Instagram at designtex_inc. If you'd like to learn more about Be Original Americas, you can visit our website, beoriginalamerica's.com, or our Instagram at beoriginalusa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.